Not getting used to that. Anyway, welcome back to Metroid Month. So games like Super Mario Bros. And The Legend of Zelda went on to become very successful franchises, seeing countless sequels and other support after their debut on the NES back in the 80s. But sadly, that wasn't quite the same case for Metroid. The game was fairly well received review-wise upon its release, but it was no blockbuster title. The game still didn't sell super well, especially in Japan, and the game stood alone as the only title in the series for a little while there. Although, and I was kind of surprised to find this out while researching for these reviews, but there was one piece of media that was released the same year as the original game. Okay, let's give this a shot. Consider this my audition tape. Did you know? There was a novelization of the original Metroid title called Metroid Zebes Invasion Order. It was released in the later part of the year that the game was published by Futoshaba and was released only in Japan and never saw any form of official English translation. It was a game book, similar to a choose-your-own-adventure novel, and the illustrations contained very different depictions of the Metroids, Samus Aran's power armor, and depicted the space pirates as humans rather than the aliens and bestian forms the franchise would later establish. This was also the first time Samus's face was shown in detail. Alright, done with that bit. Yeah, this book definitely isn't canon at this point, but if you were a fan back in those days, and I guess if you lived in Japan, this was kind of all you had to go off of if you wanted to know more about this universe. That being said, there were a few things that happened in this book that bear a remarkable resemblance to events that would take place in later games. So was all of this intentional, or was it all just pure coincidence? Well, nobody really knows for sure. It's just kind of one of those mysteries of the franchise. One element that wouldn't take long to show up in games proper, though, was this image of a heavily mutated Metroid, and man, I just love the way this thing looks. I actually kind of love all of the visual design behind this book and wouldn't mind seeing this kind of style make it into the games more often. But the mutated Metroid was a harrowing evolution of an already terrifying species of creatures, and 5 years later, after the original game's release, the franchise would play around with that idea a lot more. Yeah, 5 years. It took half a decade before there was another game in this series, but in 1991, a sequel was finally released in the form of Metroid 2: Return of Samus for the original Game Boy. Some spoilers ahead, but let's go ahead and jump on into this. The setup to this game is actually pretty simple. The Galactic Federation decided that the Metroids are
too dangerous to be left alive,
and sent a research crew to Planet SR388 to see if any were left. Yeah, there were definitely some Metroids still hanging around there. So naturally, after not hearing back from the research team, or even the search and rescue party the Federation sent to check up on them, they decided to give Samus a call.
Hey Samus, so you know those Metroid things? You're good at killing those. Can you, go to their home planet and kill all of them? Like, all of them? Nothing pays the bills like a good old genocide. Okay, thanks, bye!
So Samus starts her mission on SR388 to eradicate a species, and I guess also find the research team, but that never really comes up in the game itself. This game plays a lot like the first one, but the first thing you'll notice is, well, it's that. The screen is a lot smaller, but everything is zoomed in by quite a bit. Samus is more detailed than before, but exploring had to be designed a bit differently, just on the principle that you really can't see as much of what's around you. There are concessions made for this. Overall, the areas are much more open, so while this could have easily hindered the presentation of the game much more, the way the world of SR388 is designed serves as the best case scenario for this kind of setup. You still gotta be on your toes though. Enemies can catch you off guard a little easier than before since you have less time to notice them before they're on top of you, but this beginning area here does a pretty good job of getting you acquainted with the general pace of things before you run into your first Metroid, but before you can move into attack, the creature transforms in front of you and springs into attack mode. This little guy isn't too hard to take out, just launch like 5 missiles into his face and he's out of here, but it's still a rather alarming moment and it highlights a very dangerous element of Samus's hunt for these creatures. You're on the home turf of the Metroids now, and as you see them thrive in their natural habitat, they're prone to metamorphosizing into different forms that get deadlier with every iteration. The first game had already done a pretty good job of establishing why these aliens were a threat, but now we know that those were just the larval stages of this animal. As you continue your adventure, you'll encounter Alpha Metroids like this little guy, Gamma Metroids that pack a bigger punch but still aren't too unreasonable to take out, Zeta Metroids that really make the influence of H.R. Geiger much more apparent and can take quite a bit of punishment, and these terrifying things. The Omega Metroids love to get really up close to you, launch fireballs at you, and man, it deals a lot of damage. Your best bet is to try to get around it and launch a missile into its back since it deals about triple the amount amount of usual damage. Surviving your encounters with these guys is one thing, but first you gotta track them down. It's a lot like the first game, where you explore a series of caves and old ruins trying to hunt your prey. You'll always have this little indicator on the bottom right of the screen showing you just how many Metroids are left to destroy, and if you pause the game, you'll see how many are in the immediate area. Another nice little touch is that you can always tell when one of these little suckers is nearby by spotting the shell of their larval form hanging out on the ground, meaning you're close to another encounter. Now, while hunting Metroids is obviously the main goal, there's still plenty of reason to explore around you and collect energy tanks to enhance your life meter, stock up on missiles to increase your capacity, find new and more powerful beam weapons for your arm cannon, and new upgrades to help traversing a bit easier. The biggest standouts are the Spider Ball and Spring Ball, which help give your Morph Ball form a little more utility by letting you jump around and even cling to surfaces to reach new places. Then there's the Space Jump, which combined with your Screw Attack can make you a flying death machine, when it decides to work. There's a sort of rhythm to be found when inputting jumps to make this ability work, and I can pull it off pretty well for the most part, but there are times when it feels like it just kind of decides not to read by button presses, and I find myself falling a really long way down, and that can get really irritating. That's not my only issue with traversal though. One of the more disappointing aspects of this game is that the presentation being so up close and claustrophobic makes traveling in this game just as tedious as it was in the first, but it's also far more linear. You don't progress through the system of this planet by finding upgrades and moving forward because of the new skills at your disposal, but instead you're just kind of blocked off from moving on to the next area from this lava or acid or whatever that just magically flows downward to grant you passage whenever you kill all of the Metroids in the area that the game wants you to be in. It really feels like it takes the agency away from you, like you don't get to use Samus's abilities until the game tells you can. We'll get to it. And it's not like the presentation is all bad. Actually, I think there's plenty to commend for the time period. This game was originally meant to be played on the OG Game Boy, which didn't have much in the way of color output. Sure, future versions of the handheld would give you something nicer to look at, but in its original form, stuff had to be readable without the benefit of color display, so we get effects like the Varia suit giving us our first look at Samus's huge shoulder pads, which would go on to be kind of a staple of her design, or this effect where activating missiles shows her arm cannon opening up at the front. And I mean, I even like the designs for the evolving Metroids, but even then, you do get a taste of how the limitations of the hardware were holding this concept back. Like, this guy has legs now, but he's still floating around like a ghost. It's just silly. There was some genuine care put into the visuals here. There really was, but unfortunately, no matter how much you try to add some graphical flair to a game, it's really only going to take you so far if the gameplay itself is flawed right at the very foundation. The game still falls short of letting many of its locations be very memorable. I commend the effort for making a lot of the Metroid rooms look distinct, or adding details like new ways to enter or exit upgrade rooms for a bit of variety, but there's still a lot of copy and pasting going on here, and while I wouldn't say that using a map is quite as necessary as it was for the first game, it'll still help and I do still recommend it. The biggest reason is because with a small field of view and often samey looking environments, even knowing where certain things are won't help much because you'll have such a hard time remembering what location you're in that you'll just get lost anyway. And while there isn't a lot of backtracking in this game for item pickups and things of that nature, you still need to remember where these recharge stations are that will refill your health and missiles because the creatures on this planet can deal plenty of damage and the Metroids especially eat up a lot of missiles. And the item drops from defeated enemies are honestly kind of pathetic. The other thing you'll want to remember the location of are save stations. The password system is nowhere to be seen here, which is fine by me. Instead, you've got these save stations, but it does come with a bit of a trade-off. In the first game, death meant restarting at the beginning of the area you're in with a small amount of health, but you kept everything that you collected up to that point. In Metroid 2, on the other hand, this is your checkpoint. If you die at any point in the game, you go right back to where you last saved. This is how the series would handle saving progress going forward, but here it can really bite, especially since in the later portion of the game, the pacing of the action gets a lot faster, but the save and refill stations are really tough to come by. In fact, in one of the final areas filled with nothing but Zeta Metroids, which are probably the most difficult enemies to fight, there is a save station, sure, but no health or refill stations to be found. So unless you're really good at not taking damage and land every single missile you fire, or you just love farming enemies for tiny droplets of health or missile pickups, you gotta trek back to the last place these refill stations are, and it's a few areas back. That sucks. I guess to be fair though, it does have a sort of roundabout benefit. Yeah, it was hard, but it really helps add to the tension of fighting the more advanced versions of the Metroids. It's especially effective in this one area where you see two shells, but only a tiny little Alpha Metroid which should pose zero no threat to you at this point. But after trying to move forward and seeing that you can't keep going yet, you double back and suddenly you've got a Zeta Metroid coming after you, like all of you lovely viewers coming to hit that subscribe button. Come on, I know you want to do it. Just because I like it doesn't mean it's good, but I also can't help but think that the game is only 3 hours long anyway, so backtracking here isn't the end of the world, and if it helps enhance the intimidation factor of these creatures, that's gotta be worth something. Yeah, but nothing quite compares to what happens after you make it past this area, because just like with the original title, the ending of this game is kind of the best part. You've collected everything in the ruins of this planet, braved the dark tunnels within its caverns, and destroyed various evolutions of Metroids along the way. Now, only one remains, but as you make your way to the ultimate goal, suddenly the number jumps. These are young ones too, as a group of Metroid larvae attack you in the final corridors until you finally reach the ultimate creature, the Queen Metroid. While not a terribly difficult boss fight, she is pretty cool. Best strategy is to wait for her to open her mouth, pop her face with a missile, and hop into her mouth in ball form so you can travel down into her stomach and let the bombs do the rest. Okay, you know what? Saying it out loud, that's a little gruesome, don't you think? I love the build up to this fight, and even if the boss isn't really all that hard to take out, everything surrounding her helps elevate it a bit. But once you're done with the battle, your mission is complete. Or is it? Upon leaving the Queen's lair, you see a soul egg, which hatches into the last Metroid of its species, a baby. We'll get to it. Instead of attacking Samus, the infant lets out a soft cry, flying around Samus and not leaving her side. The creature is obviously imprinted on our bounty hunter and thinks Samus is its mother. I think this is the moment that keeps me thinking fondly of this game, despite all of its problems. We just went on a mission to murder an entire species. I mean, yeah, they pose a threat, but only because people keep taking them out of their environment and trying to use them as weapons. Here on their home planet, they live among other animals and are part of a living ecosystem, and it would be foolish to think that there wouldn't be consequences to removing them from that equation. More on that in a couple of weeks. I don't think this was a mission Samus was thrilled about. There were even times when I was feeling bad about what we were doing, but this little moment here with Samus taking in this innocent creature helps lend a bit of sweetness to what's otherwise a pretty grim tale. There's no crazy action set piece to end this game on, just a quiet walk back to your gunship with your new companion. Make it back to the ship with the baby, and the credits roll with, of course, alternate endings depending on your completion time. In a lot of ways, this game struggles to overcome a ton of technical limitations to do something rather impressive for the system it was released on. There's a tone being set here throughout the adventure, but yeah, it's held back by the hardware. There's a couple of tracks in this game I like, especially the credit and main overworld theme, but most of the others show an awkward attempt to create an ambience on a Game Boy sound chip with mixed results. Mix all of that with some flawed structure and cool but ultimately hindered presentation, and I end up feeling very mixed on this game. But there are qualities here that I have to appreciate and recognize, even some that the future remakes of this game failed to capture, but I'll have to go further into detail on that in a later Metroid month. So that's 2 games in a row now where I seem to enjoy it on at least some level, but because of their archaic design, I can't really recommend it to the general gaming community. At this point, you might be wondering why I even bothered to put together a Metroid month if my opinions on these games seem to be so middling, but if you tune in next week, it'll all start to come clear as we take a look at Super Metroid for the SNES. Until then, you can find me on Twitter, Twitch, Discord, whichever you prefer, links in the description, and of course, as always, spread the word, tell your friends, and until we see each other again, thank you so much for watching. See you next mission.
Hey, Samus, it's me again. We are actually calling to talk to you about your car's extended warranty. If you could give me a call back at 6666666. I'd really appreciate it.
Well, hey, look at that, you made it to the end of another video. Thank you so much for being here, thank you so much for watching, and wow, what a week. After posting the last video, I got a couple of shoutouts, one notably from my friend Surus on his own channel, but also from other people that I haven't even interacted with before, and it's crazy because there's like so many new people here. I went up almost 300 subscribers in the matter of a couple of days. I've never seen anything quite like that for my channel. It was really crazy, and I could not be happier to have all of you here. Thank you so much for joining me on this. I don't have a ton to say at the end of this particular video, mostly because I'm very tired and I have work in the morning as I'm recording this, and my mind is just sort of on, let's get this video done and move on to the next one because I am just blitzing throughout this entire month to get these made. But of course, I would not be able to do it at all if it weren't for lovely viewers like you, as well as my patrons. With that said, a big shout out to Patricia Marcoux and Christine Larkin, this month's top tier patrons. Thank you so much. I could not do this without you guys. I say that all the time, and I don't want to desensitize you to that, but I really do mean it. You make this possible. With all of that said, I'm gonna get back to work. Thank you so much for watching. I have been Wayne, and my throat is really sore. All right, peace.